We welcome in Husker Online's Bryan Munson. He is our recruiting insider, and normally this time of year would be a big deal with signing day being on Wednesday. But Bryan, I still don't know just how used to the new cycle people are that signing day isn't a big deal because it's early signing day. I forgot until this weekend that signing day was on Wednesday. I still don't get it.
Dude, I think that you're not the only one. So I always remembered that like the first Wednesday of the month of February was just the biggest thing for me every single year until the December date came around. And I really thought the December date was kind of a fad. Mm-hmm. I didn't think it was really going to be that big of a deal. I felt like, the junior college guys are going to have their day, and the early enrollers will have their day. And I had just no idea that 95+% of all of the guys that were going to sign would basically move their process so far left. So you're not the only one. It's a little bit of an afterthought for everybody. I know a year ago for Nebraska fans, it was way more interesting because they were still putting together, a significant part of their roster with all the portal transfer guys and a few high school guys. But this year it'll be much quieter.
One guy really on the radar, I think, for Nebraska, right, in Keona Wilhite. Tell us about him, and is there anyone else that might be in the works for the Huskers?
Oh, there might be another one out there, but I'm not really ready to divulge that one. It's Keona's the only guy that I would count on that is going to be a scholarship guy, but I do believe that there's going to be another fairly significant walk-on that'll be added to the class. Keona is an interesting dude. We had previously reported that basically things looked like that it had moved in favor of UCLA, and some things changed. Some things changed over the weekend. Let's just put it that way. Now we're feeling very good about Nebraska's chances to grab Wilhite on Wednesday. Wednesday is Wilhite is a big get for Nebraska because he can play both the jack linebacker, he can play the will linebacker. He's potentially even a guy that can put his hand in the dirt, move down to kind of a 5, maybe play a 7. Really that multi, kind of dimensional edge kind of player that's either playing in a 2-point or a 3-point, somewhere between like a Prince Will and a Cameron Lenhart. I think that this is kind of where I would kind of, compare him. I think it's a really good get for Nebraska. I think it really addresses one of the keys or one of the needs. I think that, that we would all kind of agree was still kind of necessary, that they didn't get that pass rusher, in the group. I think they probably still could have used an interior defensive lineman if they ever would have latched onto another Carlin Jones someplace. They could have used a running back once you kind of, Kewan Lacey had decided to cut ties with Nebraska in November. That really kind of changed everything up for them as well. But I think getting this edge rusher this late in the game, because of his decommitment and his NLI being revoked, or asking for a release actually from his NLI to Washington, basically created a huge opportunity for Nebraska, and they did a really good job to basically demonstrate how he will be used in Lincoln.
Speaking of running backs from Texas, a Nebraska great from down there announced his retirement today, Rex Burkhead. Bryan, in my head, I always just think of Rex Burkhead as this, grinder out of nowhere kind of guy that no one really thought about. It surprised me to learn today that Rex Burkhead was a 4-star recruit and the number 43 recruit in the state of Texas, which is basically top 100 nationally, some years.
He was Superman. I tell you what, I went and watched him play. What game was that? It was before the Skyline High School playoff game. And I think that Rex was playing quarterback, running back, safety, a little wide receiver, and some returner duties. And Skyline at the time was the high school in Dallas. Basically the DISD, kind of like that was the place. That was, and I can't remember any of the dudes that were playing against him. Most of those guys ended up going to Minnesota, if I remember correctly. They must have had 4 or 5 guys that were going D1. Anyway, and Rex was a one-man show. He did everything. He tore up Skyline single-handedly. That was, the thing about Rex was, nobody really had a great beat on where he fit the most, where he fit the best. Is it wide receiver? Is it running back? Is it safety? Is it some sort of an athlete kind of role? This is a guy that was also, probably could have been a collegiate baseball player, played middle infielder, if I remember correctly. Was a very good basketball player as well. Just an exceptional athlete, and obviously had a brother that played defensive end, I believe, for Harvard. So really smart family. Dad is in the FBI. I mean, it was a heck of a career for Rex. It was a big get for Bo Pelini. People don't understand. Pulling Rex Burkhead out of Texas was a huge thing. I do believe that he was going to leave in the state, but I think it really came down to like Nebraska, Virginia for him. I think UT, like Texas, was there, kind of at the end trying to figure out like where he was going to fit. But Nebraska really put together a great proposal and a way of kind of seeing Rex, and obviously the rest is history.
Did Nebraska see him as a running back as soon as he got to campus, or was there any of that, during the process, thinking through, talking with Burkhead, talking with assistant coaches on offense or even defense, where Rex Burkhead was going to play?
No, he was a running back. That was absolutely like a slam dunk. Like that's what you're going to do. And he got down there early, if I recall. And I remember seeing like his progress through like just 4 months in the strength and conditioning program that once he got there, and just was just built in a way that was different, when it came to true freshmen, and how he was kind of then, putting himself together, being ready to kind of play as a true freshman, which I think was big because I think Amir Abdullah ended up getting hurt later that season. So he ended up having to get kind of thrown into the action. And I think that there was some questions about how big of a role he was going to kind of play, ramping him up. And then I think it was kind of, you're the guy, like we're going to lean on you now. So he was absolutely going to be a running back for Nebraska, but I mean, that just brings back a lot of memories, talking to him, talking to his family, getting a chance to meet all of them down here at a couple of events. Just a wonderful group. So hopefully he's enjoying his retirement. I think he bought a house in Plano. I think he's back home.
I'm not going to ask you if your 1 through 10 rankings or even further. Is Rex Burkhead a top 10 running back in Nebraska football history? Is he just outside that conversation?
No, he's in there. He's absolutely in there. I couldn't rattle off, where he was at necessarily. I don't think he's top 5. I think he's somewhere in that 7 to 9 range, but he's absolutely in the top 10.
As we look at Nebraska recruiting in Texas, I know that's something Bo Pelini and that staff did, and then it dried up for a while. I know Matt Rule and his staff have made those efforts with their connections down in Texas. When Matt Rule came into Nebraska, Bryan, were there still people around there who, had that institutional knowledge of Nebraska recruiting Texas that wondered why the Huskers ever left the state? Or was Matt Rule basically starting from scratch with his own connections and not relying on, anyone else even knowing people at Nebraska?
No, there was absolutely, the brand was still strong. I mean, I'm trying to think of a couple of separate things that had happened during that time frame. I mean, I think really what happened was Nebraska left the Big 12 to go to the Big 10, and Nebraska wasn't going to be playing any games, south of Lincoln when it came to the regular schedule. And they just said, well, we're not going back to Texas. And that's the reason why we felt like we were, could recruit the state, was because we were going to be in the state playing, a couple times, maybe 3 times, depending if we're in the championship, every single year. And then all of a sudden you were kind of taking away that access, from those players and the parents. And it seemed, I think, to them to be a tougher sell. But in reality, there's players that leave the state of Texas to go anywhere in the nation anyway. Big Ten's always had success coming down here and grabbing players. And certainly there's a lot of other teams that love to cherry pick the state of Texas. And Nebraska could have still stayed very strong, south of the Red River if they decided that they were going to go ahead and do that. But everything philosophically, fundamentally changed with recruiting. They shifted that footprint, to the east. Nebraska, they started going after kids in Ohio. They started going after kids more in the Big Ten footprint.
Florida, Georgia.
That was a big thing.
The other thing I want to ask you about that, Bryan, is with Texas's move to the SEC. You know that players go all the way across the country from Texas anyways. Does it get easier for Nebraska to recruit in Texas with the Longhorns jumping to a new conference? Does it get more difficult with more SEC teams maybe trying to reach in with the appeal of going to Texas every so often? Or is it just always going to be a free-for-all like it has been with just the sheer number of talent in Texas?
I think it stayed about the same, to be honest with you. I do feel like there isn't like, you already have A&M here, you had LSU next door, you're getting Oklahoma north of the Red River, so Oklahoma's closer to Dallas than Texas really is, right, from a distance perspective. So Austin to Dallas is further away than Norman to Dallas. So you still find those players that feel, a little bit more comfortable, going to Oklahoma, or you still find those guys that just say flat out, I'm going to go play somewhere else, in the country. I'm leaving the state. This is my opportunity to go ahead and do so. Texas is definitely trying their hardest to nail down every single player that they can in the state. There's always kind of been a gentleman's agreement, between A&M and Texas that, if the best players in the state don't want to go to their school, they will try to steer them to the other school. They want the best players to stay home. There's a benefit there for all sides when those players do that. So right now, I think though that Texas is kind of hitting on all cylinders. They're getting guys nationally, like Brandon Baker. They're getting all the guys to kind of stay home as well. And then A&M with their coaching change too, they've done good to kind of reconcile things. And after Jimbo had been fired. So it's going to be interesting to see how things kind of go moving forward, but nothing really has changed there. And SEC schools will continue to recruit the state of Texas. There's just too many guys that come up through Texas that can go play Division I football that Texas can't take them all.
We're talking with Bryan Munson of Husker Online here. He did drop a nugget, didn't give a name or anything, but definitely stay tuned to Husker Online. I'm sure Bryan's Twitter for some more news regarding Nebraska recruiting as we get closer to signing day. A different Orange UT is in the news, though, for recruiting reasons, Bryan. Tennessee being investigated for more, improprieties with NIL, but with a Nebraska tie, their chancellor, Donnie Plowman, sent a letter, put out a statement about just the cognitive dissonance, really, with NIL and recruiting, where the NCAA says, recruits can talk to collectives, but those conversations can't be about recruiting. And Donnie Plowman basically said, so you're saying they can have the conversations, but they can't have the conversations because those are at their core recruiting conversations. Do Tennessee and Virginia have a case against the NCAA? Is Donnie Plowman right?
It's going to be really interesting. I think that if there is one thing through all the documentation, the letters, the conversation back and forth, the stuff that's been made public, I agree at least that NIL is not very clear. It's not very clear on basically what the things are that they can do. It's not very clear on the things that they can't do. And it seems like there's an idea that the NCAA holds about how it's supposed to work, and it's maybe almost like how it's being perceived or how they think that they're understanding it. And it's not the same way. So I think that there's going to be some things that come up here about clarification and basically how foggy and how unclear the statements and the rules kind of are with the NCAA and the NIL. I personally felt like after reading some of the stuff last week, Tennessee felt like they weren't in the wrong about doing anything. The NCAA, on the other hand, they seem to feel like they have got a pretty strong case against Tennessee. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this thing kind of moves forward. Cause I feel like you have two sides that really truly feel like that, they feel like they're in the right when it comes to about how things have been handled.
Whenever we have the discussions about NCAA and NIL and enforcement, Strick always refers to the NCAA as, the Chihuahua, right? The yip, 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 not really the pit bull. But I want your opinion on this, Bryan. Would it be better for the NCAA to keep trying to fight this fight and force the rules on its books and keep looking like the bad guy? Or is there maybe a period of time where the NCAA would go hands off, let it be the Wild West and say, okay, schools, this is what you asked for, and use that time, however long it is, 5 years, 10 years, to come together with with leaders, student athletes, chancellors, presidents, business leaders to, come up with a solid plan that makes more people happy. So when people get frustrated, even more frustrated about the state of NIL, the NCAA can maybe save some face and be welcomed back as a, hey, you actually did your job right this time, sort of, conquering hero almost.
I almost feel like it's the Wild Wild West right now. I think we're already there. And is it helpful now to kind of keep going down this path to get a better sample of basically what the good things and the bad things are that are happening? Possibly, but then they're already calling Tennessee and other schools out, when it comes to, the NIL rule that they feel like are the rules that they feel like are so clear that other people will tell you that they're as clear as mud. I'm of the opinion that the NCAA, if they continue to keep acting out here, where if it's a Tennessee and whoever else next, to where they don't feel like the rules are clear and they're getting punished for this because it's leaving open some things for, some substitution or, some assumption, they may find themselves, if we really start talking about a couple of super conferences, those super conferences may decide that the NCAA doesn't add a lot of value to them anymore, and that they can go ahead and basically create their own type of rules committee and have their own oversight that would be better than what the NCAA can even provide right now. And I think that they are really getting close to having that become a more of a bigger thought by other teams and other schools. And as we move closer to those two super conferences, that could happen.
Bryan, that's a great point, because one of the things that I found is that they're picking and choosing those battles with. If you went and dug into everybody's treasure vaults and all that stuff, you can always find something. And it's like the one that really threw me off was the one with Florida State, I believe. One of the coaches, all he did was he's on an on-campus visit. All he does is drop him off at an NIL meeting, and he gets flagged for a penalty on that.
Yeah,
I think that's crazy. Like that's
Yeah. And think about the worst thing that ever happened, like not the worst thing in NCAA history, but like maybe the most memorable is the famous Eric Crouch sandwich.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we really trying to do here? Were we missing the bags of money before that we all claimed and felt like we're there? Or now that you can pay these guys legally, but there's still a framework around it, that maybe that the rules still aren't being followed to the T, and we're still getting caught up on who's ride sharing and who's getting a little bit of another little privilege, when it comes to pennies on the dollar versus thousands of dollars. Give me a break. Some of the stuff that's being thrown out there now, this is not in the spirit of NIL. When Sam Keller brought this thing forward, the idea was my name, image, likeness is in this football game. I should have received some sort of compensation for that, which I think was $8 or $10 or whatever it was. But now these guys are signing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of deals and driving leased vehicles and stuff like that. It's way, way different, I think, than anybody ever intended when Sam Keller first submitted basically that lawsuit.
Who missed the boat? Was it players, business leaders, administrators, or everyone?
Oh, I think everybody shares some blame here. I mean, I think you're going to give some people an inch, they're going to take you a mile, and they're going to figure out how far they can take this thing before the NCAA or somebody else says this thing is completely crooked. It's not working the way that we intended. You had a head coach from Boston College leave because he's sick of having to re-recruit the players that were already on his roster. I totally get it. Like I said, I think it's the Wild Wild West right now. I think you're there. I think you're just in the early stages of it.
Last thing for you then, Bryan, it's early in the week. You have full ability to change your predictions as we get closer. So your Super Bowl champion is?
Oh, man. I'm leaning towards San Francisco. And it is because I'm a little bit of an AFC guy, obviously, but I like McCaffrey. I like the way San Francisco dialed it back in a little bit last week. I felt like they could have got taken behind the woodshed a little bit in the first half, and They were able to get things calmed down. They're going to need that ability to kind of get back to what it is that they do great, and that's run the football. And Purdy can break the pocket and run the ball a little bit, and they got plenty of weapons from the tight ends to the wide receivers. So I love their defense. I love their defense. So I'm going to go with the 49ers.
You're saying they're more talented than the Taylor Swift conspiracy, basically.
I'm saying, woo.
No, I like what they do. I love that offense. When people say that's what Rule and Satterfield want to get towards, man, I will just go ahead and tell you right now, that would be a thing of beauty. Yeah. I really love watching the 49ers offense.
If 49ers let Kelsey go 11 for 11 in targets to receptions, they're in trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do feel like they're still looking for a more dependable down the field threat. But Kelsey did a great job sitting down in those pockets in the zone and making some unbelievable catches, and he crushed Buffalo as well. They definitely have to rattle Mahomes a little bit, but I think the X factor, the real guy that makes the most difference to KC, is Pacheco.
Yeah,
I think Pacheco has a way of keeping drives alive and breaking off some runs. He's so tough to kind of get a square hit on, and Mahomes can do it with his feet too.
Bryan, as always, we appreciate your time. We will direct people to your Twitter, to Husker Online, for that nugget you might be dropping by Wednesday. We'll look forward to that and chatting again here soon.
Sounds good, man. See you guys later.